I was born into a house that looked normal from the outside. 4 walls, a roof, a father, a mother, but inside, fear lived with us like a permanent guest. My father married my mother when they were both young and hopeful. In the beginning, people said he was a hard-working man, but slowly, something changed. Addiction entered his life quietly, like a shadow that grows longer at sunset. By the time I was old enough to understand silence, my father had already learned how to break it. He married another woman. That day, my mother didn't cry loudly. She didn't scream or complain. She just sat quietly, holding her hands together, as if she was afraid her heart might fall out if she let go. After the second marriage, our home changed forever. My stepmother moved in, and suddenly the air felt heavier. My mother became invisible. Every word she spoke was questioned. Every mistake was blamed on her. And when my father came home drunk, the house would hold its breath. I was just a child, but I knew one thing clearly. Nighttime was dangerous. My father's addiction controlled him. When he drank, he was no longer the man people respected outside. His voice became loud, his eyes became angry, and his hands, they carried pain. I would hide in a corner, pulling my knees close to my chest, praying he wouldn't notice us. My mother tried to protect me. She always stood in front of me, like a shield made of love and fear. She would whisper, "Go inside, don't look." But how can a child not look when his mother is suffering? Many nights I heard her crying softly after everything went quiet. She thought I was asleep. She thought I didn't know, but children know. We always know. School became my escape, not because it was happy, but because it was safer than home. When teachers asked me why I was always silent, I had no answer. How do you explain a broken home to people who only see walls? Years passed like this. Pain became routine. Fear became normal. And my mother, she became thinner, quieter, and older than her age. Her smile disappeared, but her love for me never did. She worked, cooked, cleaned, and still found time to pray for my future one day. While she was tying my school bag, I noticed her hands shaking. I asked softly, "Amy, are you okay?" She smiled that same tired smile and said, "I'm fine. Just focus on your studies." That was the moment something changed inside me. I realized that one day, I would have to become strong enough to save her. As I grew older, I understood that my father would never change. Addiction had taken everything from him: his kindness, his responsibility, his soul. The house was no longer a home, it was a cage, and I was counting the days until I could break us free. I was still a boy, but that night forced me to grow older than my age. The house felt smaller every day, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. Silence had become dangerous when my father was quiet. It meant the storm was gathering. My stepmother stayed in her corner of the house, avoiding our eyes. She, too, lived in fear. But fear makes people choose sides, and hers was never ours. My mother learned how to read footsteps. She knew which sound meant sleep and which meant trouble. She knew how to keep her voice low, how to finish work quickly, how to stand between me and anger without ever saying the word protect. Mothers don't announce their courage, they live it. That evening, the air was heavy. I remember the way my mother folded clothes with shaking hands, careful and slow, as if neatness could keep peace. I tried to help her, but she smiled and told me to finish my homework. Her smile was tired, the kind that hides more than it shows. When my father returned, the smell reached us before his voice did. My heart started racing. I moved closer to my mother without thinking. He spoke loudly, then louder, words falling like stones. I don't remember what he accused us of, those details blur, but I remember how my mother stood straight, how she didn't answer back, how she tried to calm a fire that never wanted water that night. Something broke inside me. I realized that waiting for change was the same as accepting pain. I realized that love should not require silence. And I realized that my mother's strength had limits, not because she was weak, but because no one should be strong forever. Later, when the house finally fell into an uneasy quiet, my mother sat beside me on the floor. We didn't turn on the light. Darkness felt safer. She held my hand and asked a question that changed our lives. "Would you leave with me if we could?" I didn't hesitate. I nodded, though fear filled my chest. Leaving meant uncertainty. Staying meant something worse. From that moment, we began planning our escape in whispers. We saved small amounts of money, coins hidden in a cloth, hope hidden in patience. I took small jobs after school, nothing big, just enough to add to our secret dream. My mother worked harder than ever, her hands worn, her back aching, her spirit refusing to surrender. There were days I almost lost courage, nights when fear told me we would never make it out, but then I would see my mother wake before sunrise, pray quietly, and face the day with dignity. If she could keep going, so could I. The day we left, the sky was pale, like it didn't want to watch. We took only what we could carry. No goodbyes, no explanations, just a door closing behind us, not loudly, not proudly, but finally. The new place was small, one room, thin walls, but it was ours. That first night, we sat on the floor again, just like before, but this time the silence wasn't dangerous. It was healing. My mother cried softly, not from pain, but from release. I held her hand and promised her something I didn't yet know how to give. "I'll take care of you, always." I didn't know how hard that promise would be. I didn't know how long the road ahead was. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time in our lives, we were free to hope if you want. I can continue with, I was 16 when I truly understood that love alone would not save my mother. That night began like many others, with silence so heavy it felt louder than screams. My mother sat on the floor, folding old clothes we didn't need anymore, her hands shaking slightly. I could tell she was trying to stay busy so she wouldn't think. She always did that when she sensed danger coming. Then the door opened. The smell reached us before my father's voice did. Alcohol, sharp and bitter, mixed with anger that had been growing somewhere outside all day. His footsteps were unsteady, but his words were cruelly clear. "Where is she?" he shouted. My mother stood up slowly. She never ran. She believed running would make things worse. I stepped in front of her without thinking, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Abba, please," I said, my voice cracking. "She hasn't done anything," he laughed. A laugh that still visits me in my sleep. "You've grown brave," he said, pointing at me, "because of her." The next moments are burned into my memory, but I will not describe them in detail. What matters is not what he did, it's what I felt. Fear, yes, but also something new, a burning decision inside my chest. I was no longer just a son watching his mother suffer. I had become her shield. When it was over, my father left the house again, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. My mother collapsed onto the floor, not crying, just breathing as if she was checking whether she was still alive. I knelt beside her and held her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Because of me, you are suffering." Those words broke something inside me. "No," I said, tears falling freely. "Because of him, and I promise you this will end." That night, while my mother slept with pain written across her face, I stayed awake. I stared at the cracked ceiling and planned a future that did not include fear. I started working the next morning. School during the day, small jobs in the evening, carrying boxes, cleaning shops, doing anything that paid even a little. I hid my exhaustion behind a smile so my mother wouldn't worry. Every rupee I earned felt like a step away from my father. But freedom is expensive, and abuse leaves scars deeper than money can heal. My stepmother tried to stop us. She told relatives lies. She said my mother had poisoned me against my father. Some believed her, others stayed silent. Silence, I learned, is its own kind of cruelty. One evening, my mother sat beside me and said something that terrified me more than my father ever had. "Maybe we should go back," she said quietly. "At least there we have a roof." I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who had given me everything, who had survived more pain than anyone should. "No," I said firmly. "We will sleep hungry if we must, but we will never go back to that house." She cried then, not from pain, but from relief. That was the moment I became an adult. I didn't know how long the road would be. I didn't know how hard it would get. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would save my mother even if it cost me my childhood. The night I finally decided to leave my father's house was quiet in a frightening way. There were no shouts, no crashing sounds, no smell of alcohol filling the air. That silence felt heavier than screams. I sat on the floor beside my mother. She was holding her arm, her eyes fixed on the wall as if she was no longer in the room. I had seen that look too many times before. It was the look of someone who had learned not to cry anymore, because crying never changed anything. That night, I realized something painful and clear. If I stayed silent any longer, I would lose her not to death but to broken hope. I whispered, "Amy, we can't stay here anymore." She turned her face toward me slowly, her eyes filled with fear, not relief. "Where will we go?" she asked. Her voice was weak, like she was afraid even the walls might hear her. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But if we stay, he will destroy you, and maybe me too." She looked at the door, the same door my father would enter through every night, drunk and angry. That door had stolen her smile, her youth, her health. She nodded. That single nod changed our lives forever. We packed before sunrise. No bags, no suitcases, just a few clothes wrapped in an old bedsheet. That was all our life had become. Every sound made my heart race. I feared my father would wake up, smell alcohol on his own breath, and stop us. But fate was kind for once. He slept, unaware that his control was slipping away. Before leaving, my mother stood in the corner of the room where she had suffered for years. She touched the wall gently, as if saying goodbye to her pain. "I gave this house everything," she whispered. "It gave me scars." I held her hand and led her outside. The morning air felt different, lighter, freer. For the first time, we were breathing without fear. The new house was small. One room, a broken fan, cracked walls, but it had something the old house never had: peace. That first night, my mother slept without fear. No footsteps, no shouting, no raised hands. I sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall, promising myself something silently. I will never let anyone hurt her again. Life wasn't easy. I worked during the day, studied at night, and did every small job I could find. Some days we ate properly, some days we didn't, but my mother never complained. Instead, she would wait for me at the door every evening, her eyes searching the street, her lips praying silently. "Did you eat?" She would ask first, never, "Are you tired?" That's how mothers love. They disappear so their children can exist. Even after we left, my father didn't leave us. He would show up sometimes, angry, drunk, blaming us for his loneliness. He said my mother had ruined his life. I stood between them every time. The boy who once hid in corners had become a wall. "You ruined your own life," I said once, my voice shaking but firm. "She's free now." That day my mother cried, not from pain, but from pride. "I never thought I'd see this day," she said, "my son protecting me." Years passed. My mother's hair turned gray. My hands grew rough from work, but her smile slowly returned. Sometimes, late at night, she would touch the scars on her arms and say softly, "All that pain, and still Allah kept me alive to see you become this." Those words healed wounds no medicine ever could. I realized then this story was never about a cruel father. It was about a mother who survived, and a son who refused to let her suffer alone. The day we moved into our new house did not feel like a celebration. There were no smiles, no excitement, no laughter. There was only silence, a silence so heavy that it felt louder than all the shouting. We had escaped. My mother stood in the doorway of the small rented house, holding a bag that carried her entire past inside it. Her hands were shaking not from fear anymore, but from exhaustion. She had survived years of pain, and survival itself had made her tired in a way sleep could never heal. "This is our home now," I said softly. She nodded, but her eyes were wet. Not because she missed my father, but because when a woman leaves suffering behind, she also leaves a part of herself there. That night, for the first time in my life, we slept without fear. No sounds of angry footsteps, no smell of addiction in the air, no waiting for screams. Yet, my mother could not sleep. I woke up and saw her sitting on the floor, praying quietly. Tears fell onto her prayer mat like rain. "Ami, why are you crying?" I asked. She looked at me and smiled a broken smile. "I am not crying because I am sad," she said. "I am crying because Allah finally heard me." That night, I understood something painful. Freedom does not erase trauma. It only gives you space to feel it. Life in the new house was hard. I worked long hours. Sometimes I returned home with tired legs and an empty pocket, but every time I saw my mother waiting for me, I felt rich again. She tried to hide her pain. Some days she laughed. Some days she cooked with love. But some nights, she cried silently when she thought I was asleep. Years of cruelty had carved scars inside her heart. I wanted to fix everything. But you cannot undo years of suffering with good intentions alone. So I did the only thing I could. I stayed one evening. My mother held my hand and said something that broke me. "If you had not grown up early," she whispered, "I would not have survived." Those words felt heavier than any burden I had ever carried. I realized my childhood had been stolen, but I would steal joy back from the future. I promised myself that no matter how poor we were, no matter how lonely the road became, I would never let her feel abandoned again. I became her shield. She became my strength. Sometimes people ask me about my father. Do I hate him? I don't. Hate requires energy, and I spent all mine surviving. He chose addiction. He chose cruelty. And those choices took everything from him, his family, his respect, his soul. I pray for him from a distance, not because he deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. Today, my mother still carries sadness in her eyes, but now there is also light. She laughs more. She sleeps peacefully. She no longer flinches at loud sounds. Sometimes she sits beside me and says, "You saved me." But the truth is, she saved me first. She endured everything so I could have a future, and I fought so she could finally breathe. This story is not just ours. It is the story of millions of mothers who stay silent, of children who grow up too fast, of homes where pain hides behind closed doors. If you are living in fear, know this: leaving is not weakness. Surviving is bravery, and protecting your mother is the greatest honor a child can have. He destroyed our past, but he could not destroy our bond. I saved my mother, but she gave me my life. The day we left that house for the last time, my mother didn't look back. She stood at the doorway for a few seconds, holding a small bag in her trembling hands. That house had never been a home for her. It was a place where her silence screamed louder than her tears, where nights were longer than days, and where love had slowly died under fear. I took her hand. "Ami, it's over," I whispered. She nodded, but her eyes were empty, as if she had already cried all the tears her heart could hold. Life in the new house was quiet. Too quiet. At first, silence scared us. We were so used to shouting, breaking things, and footsteps filled with anger that peace felt unreal. My mother would wake up at night, frightened by dreams that refused to leave her. Sometimes she flinched when I spoke loudly. Sometimes she apologized for things she never did. That broke me. I realized then that saving her body was not enough. I had to help heal her soul. I worked harder than ever before. Some days I came home exhausted, my hands aching, my heart tired, but when I saw my mother waiting with weak smiles and warm prayers, everything felt worth it. Slowly, very slowly, she began to change. She started cooking again, not because she was forced to, but because she wanted to. She began to laugh softly at old memories. She planted flowers outside the house, saying, "They deserve a peaceful place to grow." just like us. One evening while she was folding clothes, she looked at me and said something I will never forget. Beta, you became my strength when I had none. I turned away so she wouldn't see my tears. Months later, we heard news about my father. His addiction had taken everything from him. Friends, health, respect, all gone. People said he asked about us sometimes. They said he regretted his past. They said many things, but regret does not erase scars. My mother listened quietly, then said only one line: I forgive him, but I choose peace. That was the moment I knew she was finally free. Today, our house is small, but it is filled with dignity. There is no fear behind closed doors, no bruises hidden under sleeves, no crying in silence. Just survival, just healing, just hope. I didn't just save my mother, I saved myself too. And if you're reading this while living in pain, please remember one thing: love should never hurt, silence should never be forced, and no child should have to grow up watching their mother break.